Good morning, Commodores. Thank you. Welcome to the Conversation with the Chancellor, moderated by Willie Geist. My name is Anu Pardeshi, and I am the president of the Vanderbilt Alumni Association Board. It is my honor to welcome you to this event. To those of you watching online, we are glad you could join us virtually to hear from the Chancellor today. And for those of you here in person, I hope you're enjoying the celebratory weekend of reunion events. How about a round of applause for the whole team? I've been thrilled to connect with so many Vanderbilt alumni in my role with the Alumni Association Board. I've always been a proud Vanderbilt alumnus. I'm a triple door, married to a quadruple door, so I'm really Vanderbilt for life. If any alum out there knows of a quick way for me to tie it up, please let me know. But serving on the Alumni Association Board has connected me to even more of our global network of more than 154,000 alumni. This network includes CEOs of major companies, scientists, social and tech entrepreneurs, elected officials, film producers, doctors, athletes, teachers, and other leaders in nearly every industry. And what connects us all is Vanderbilt. We are Vanderbilt for life because of what we learned on this very campus, and because we know the impact that Vanderbilt has had on the world and how it will continue to shape the world. Each of us has dared to grow beyond our time on campus. It's what makes our network so strong. Today, you'll have a chance to hear directly from the Chancellor about the priorities and future of our shared alma mater, and how you can play a part in the future of this great university. An internationally renowned political scientist and management scholar, Chancellor Diermeier is the 9th Chancellor of Vanderbilt University. Chancellor Diermeier is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the Guggenheim Foundation. He has published 4 books, with his 5th to appear in March 2023, and more than 100 research articles, mostly in the fields of political science, economics, and management, but also in other areas ranging from linguistics, sociology and psychology, to computer science, operations research, and applied mathematics. On a personal note, do not play against him in any game of trivia. Prior to his position at Vanderbilt, the Chancellor served in leadership roles and faculty roles at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and as Dean of the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. From 2016 to 2020, he was the provost of the University of Chicago, where he was responsible for all academic and research programs across the university and oversaw the university's $5 billion budget. Throughout his career, Chancellor Diermeier has been an advisor to governments, nonprofits, and leading companies, mostly in the area of crisis management. He has served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations, the technology company Citybase until its acquisition by GTY Technologies, and the management board of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He is currently a board member of Vanderbilt University Medical Center, the Field Museum, and Argonne National Library. A native of Berlin, Germany, and a first-generation college graduate, Chancellor Diermeier earned a PhD in political science from the University of Rochester. He also holds master's degrees in political science from the University of Munich and in philosophy from the University of Southern California. Please join me in welcoming Chancellor Diermeier.
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. So, well, thank you for the kind introduction. And most importantly, thank you all for being here with us today. It is wonderful to see so many of you. But I really know you're here to see Willie Geist, and we'll get going to that in a minute. So I did a little customer research on my way back in, so I know. But that won't hurt my feelings. And I couldn't be happier to welcome all of you back. As you know, we've had some somewhat challenging couple of years in higher education, of course, across the country and across the world. And so we thought, rather than just canceling reunions, as many of our peers did. We're going to double down and triple down, and we're going to have a triple reunion, a reunion to end all reunions. The first in the history of Vanderbilt, and I want to thank all of you that made that possible, and I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. If this was the State of the Union address, I can tell you the state of the university is strong. We are in much better shape by any measure, by any dimension that we look at than we were 2 years ago before COVID, and by any measure in the best position that we are in the history of the university. We are in a very strong financial position. Our endowment is now roughly around 10.5. We were kissing 11, and then bad things happened across the world, so we went down a little bit. But that went up from around 6.7 2 years ago. So dramatic increase on that. Our financial performance is great. We're able to support our students and undergraduates and graduate students at an unprecedented level. We have the strongest class of incoming students across the university, nowhere more than among our undergraduates. We're now having 47,000 applicants for 1,700 slots, where our admit rate is roughly 6.7%. Which puts us now in striking distance of like the Princeton, Harvard, Yales of the world. So this is a very, very desirable place to go as an undergraduate, as a student overall, and we're delighted to invite the students here to Vanderbilt, and if you have a chance to meet them, they're amazing. They are amazing. We also were able to bring great new faculty to Vanderbilt. Some of you may know this, but many of our peers during COVID decided to stop hiring. They were also cutting benefits of faculty, laying off staff. We decided to do the opposite. So we decided that this was a great opportunity when nobody else was hiring to bring great new talent to Vanderbilt. So we invested an additional $100 million in a program we call Destination Vanderbilt, good name, and in order to attract the best and the brightest to come to Vanderbilt. This has had a transformative impact already on our faculty. We have around 160 new faculty that we welcome to campus, nowhere more than in highly competitive fields such as computer science, biomedical areas, and so forth. So on all these dimensions, whether we look at how we work, how we operate, our faculty, our students, we are in great shape. But we like to say around here, we are proud but not satisfied. And so we're now looking towards what's the next step, what's the next chapter for us here at Vanderbilt. And this is particularly important to us in an opportune moment because, as you know, next year we're celebrating our 105th anniversary, our sesquicentennial. I've said this now often enough that I can say it without any difficulty. And it's a moment for us to reflect on who we are, take pride in what we accomplished, and set our aspirations higher. That will mean, among many other things, we will continue to invest in undergraduates. Our goal is to have the wonderful residential experience that our first-year students now enjoy, and many of our upperclassmen enjoy for every student throughout their first 4 years. So that when you see cranes on campus for the residential colleges, the beautiful buildings on West End, that's what we're doing. We're going to continue to invest in our graduate students, in our graduate schools, doctoral students, professional schools. I spent my first hour and a half this morning with the Owen Alumni Board to think what we want to do in Owen and engineering and the other graduate schools such as law, divinity, and so forth. And we want to invest in athletics. This is an important part for us. For those of you that care deeply about athletics, and I know there are one or two among you that fall into that category, athletics is as much part of this university as the law school. We're fully committed to it. We think it is a hugely important part, not only of our legacy, but about our future. And thank you. And to get to that point, to accomplish these things, we want to take some lessons from the last 2 years. We want to understand what was it that made it possible to go through COVID and think about COVID not as a set of challenges, but as an opportunity and come through thriving. And I think there are 3 important lessons for us. One of them is, if we act as one Vanderbilt, we can move mountains. This is the most collaborative, cooperative university that I've ever been part of. There's a real sense of community here. You can feel the energy when you walk across campus. Let's lean into that, and let's do the type of things that others can't do because they're more siloed and they're not part of one university. Second, we have learned that we can operate at a higher level of metabolism. This is a dangerous metaphor with a lot of experts in here, a little biological metaphor, but what we mean by that, we can be faster, more agile. We will have a willingness to take risks. We know not that everything will work out, but we're setting our aspiration at a level where we want to take chances, we want to invest, and we want to do it with purpose and with intent. And then the last one, to me, arguably the most important, is we want to be truly, authentically ourselves. We do not want to look over our shoulders what others are doing. We're going to pay attention what they're doing, but we want to do what is right and appropriate and the right direction for Vanderbilt. And sometimes I think in our past, we have been too worried about what others are thinking about us. And when people talk about the Harvard of the South, we're done with that, okay? We want to be we want to lead, and we want to do it in the context of all the challenges that we have in higher education. We want to do it with purpose and faithfully connected to that and mindful of what makes Vanderbilt special. And I'll just give you one example of that. We all know how challenging the culture is across college campuses. Erosion of civil discourse across the country and across universities. We're fully committed to that. We're working at it every day. We're fully committed to open expression. Also what we call principled neutrality, which means that the university will not take politicized positions on issues, but create a platform that enables their faculty and their students to think for themselves. Universities' role the role of universities should be to encourage debates and not to settle it. So we have high aspirations. We have a wonderful 150 years, or next 150 years, that we go with optimism and then a strong position. But we will need you. We will need your support. We need the support of our alumni, your ambassadorship to tell about the great things that happen at Vanderbilt, your advice, your support, because we are a community for life. Couldn't be more optimistic, couldn't be more pleased where we are. So thank you for being part of Vanderbilt and for doing all the wonderful things you do to support us every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Diermeier, for your inspiring words and for the vision that you've laid out to guide our beloved university's future. We'll now begin the Q&A portion of the event, which will be moderated by Willie Geist, a Vanderbilt class of 1997 graduate. Willie is the host of NBC News Sunday Today with Willie Geist. He is also a co-host of MSNBC's Morning Joe and a regular host and contributor to Today, as well as to NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt and Meet the Press. He also contributes to the NBC Sports Group, where he hosted coverage of several Olympic Games. Willie is the author of 3 books, including the New York Times bestsellers Good Talk, Dad and American Freak Show. He lives in New York with his wife, Christina Sharkey Geist, who is also a Vanderbilt class of 1997 graduate, and their 2 children. Please join me in welcoming Willie Geist.
Thank you, Chancellor. I noticed the biggest cheer rightly went to my wife, Christina. I heard the whoops in the back of the room. That's how it goes for me. I think I speak for everyone in this room listening to those admission stats saying, thank God I got into Vanderbilt when I did. Good Lord. Christina and I also went to high school together. Went to a big public high school in New Jersey. And in 1990, '93, they came up there with a net from Vanderbilt and scooped up 7 kids from our high school class. And we all came to Vanderbilt together, 7 of us who came down here. So at the time, they were nationalizing the school. And my God, did it work. Look at us now. But it was funny back then, around the Northeast, people would say, where are you going to school? And they'd say, we're going to Vanderbilt. They'd say, oh, down in Philadelphia. No, not. Truly, how many times did that happen? And we'd say, no, not Villanova, Vanderbilt. And they go, where's Vanderbilt? It's in Nashville. Now, if we don't even tell people in New York we went to Vanderbilt, because they're going to say, oh, we'd love to take you to dinner. Our daughter's a sophomore and a junior. Everyone wants to go to Vanderbilt, which is a tribute to what the Chancellor and his predecessors have built here and what we all benefit from and are a part of now. It's amazing to be back. This is my 25th reunion, and Chancellor, my parents dropped me off and I hugged them in a parking lot right there. Aww. In the fall of '93. I lived there was some overflow, so I lived on the top floor of a sophomore dorm that was called Vanderbilt Hall right there. And this is where it all started for us. So it is truly surreal for Christina and for me to be back here sitting in this seat next to you. So this is very exciting. Thank you for having us. You took this job at a very interesting time, sir. Right in the middle of a pandemic, right in the middle of COVID. You were formally invested last spring, but you'd been on the job for a couple years by then. What has it been like to run a university, to grow a university in this extraordinary time?
Yeah, as they say, timing is everything in life. And so I started, my first day on the job was July 1, 2020. And I had carefully and smartly decided to step down from my role as provost on February 1, 2020, oh. to have a smooth, careful, well thought out transition. Well, that was out of the window within a month. And we had to go to work right away. And so it was a absolutely amazing experience. God knows what the future will hold, but it may very well have been the leadership challenge of a lifetime in higher education, in academia, as I know it has been for many of you. What was really amazing for me was to see the whole community come together. And it was very quickly clear when I had my first conversations with the search committee and with the board that this was a very special place. It was a special university that could work together and that could get things done by coming together. But nowhere was this more tested than during COVID. And our staff did Herculean amazing things. I mean, literally like 14, 16 hours a day for weeks. There was a time when I told my vice chancellors, I think it was around July, maybe August, I said, everybody takes 3 days off, okay? Because they were literally working without a day off. And then we had some staff members that refused to take days off. So we said, if you're not taking 3 days off, we're gonna shut down your email. And the dedication was unbelievable. Our faculty, we asked them to do an in-person and an online class, so that we could switch back and forth between the two modalities, because we were committed to bringing all our students back on campus, because we believe in the power of living and learning together in a residential university. And that meant everything had to be changed. So we had like one-way streets, and we literally had roundabouts in the, on the floor plans. Every room was turned into a classroom. We had classes in the law school library. We had tents. It was an Herculean effort. And of course, we didn't know how it would go, so we were prepared to switch back and forth between online and in person. Fortunately, we never had to do that. We never had a lockdown. We had the majority of our classes in person. And then the students had to step up. They had to be willing to be as much part of this effort as anybody else. We asked a lot about them, and they delivered. And there was a pivotal moment on that. I still remember that well. When we started 2 weeks after Notre Dame. And Notre Dame had started and had to shut down within 2 days because there were allegedly some football party activities that got everybody in trouble. So we thought that was the moment when I thought, oh, this may not work. And then you had all these negative media coverage, right? And it's like we would be super spreaders. And my favorite thing, how can you trust 18-year-olds? Their frontal lobes are not fully developed. And I was so irritated. And we recorded a video on the spot. And we wanted to set the tone like a locker room where everybody thinks you can't do it. So I basically said, we worked countless hours to get you to this point. Now it's up to you. And make no mistake, the media doesn't believe you can do it. And then I made the quotes with the frontal lobe and all that stuff. And I said, prove them wrong. Okay, this is your moment to prove them wrong because you don't know what our students can do. They're underestimating you, and they did amazing. The student body did amazing for 2 years. It was rough on them, was tough on them, but I think they also grew in the experience, and we came together as a community, which really, really unbelievable. And I'll say one more thing. We had to take a lot of chances. We had to do things that were going against the grain. The Ivies, for example, shut down the entire athletics programs in the fall of 2020. We did just the opposite. Every one of our teams competed. And that took a lot of work, and it took also the support of the board. Because we did things our way, we paid attention what others are doing, but our board was there with us every step of the way. We had, I think, 58 board meetings in 1 year with ad hoc committees, everything. It was incredible, but they were there with us, they supported the leadership, and that allowed us to make the type of tough decisions that really got us to this point.
And you prove that those frontal lobes are developed.
They're
And that was
developing.
the-
They're
on their way.
developing. They're
They're on their
developing.
way.
We're always
They're on
growing,
their way.
right? We're
Yeah,
always
yeah.
growing. Yes.
So, Chancellor, what appealed to you from the outside? You've worked at University of Chicago, Northwestern, Stanford. We just heard your resume.
Yeah.
What was it about this place, this school, that you saw as being special?
Yes.
Why did you want to take on this challenge?
So I am drawn to leadership roles, maybe to my detriment, where I want to be in an environment where I can make a difference. So I don't want people to write on my tombstone, he didn't sink the ship. That is not a good role for me. And so I wanted to be in a place that had the appetite to go to the next level, to create something new and exciting, and that had the conditions for it to be successful. Because if you just have aspirations, but you don't have the capabilities and the context, it's not going to work. And Vanderbilt really had both. I think we had a lot of factors that were all aligned. Great culture, the sense of like purpose, the sense of collaboration, working together. And then I think also a great track record. I mean, this university has been on the run for at least the last 15, 20 years. My predecessor did an amazing job. I mean, one reason why we could do what we could do during COVID, because we were in a stronger financial position than many of our peers. And that again that gave us room to maneuver. And that's the work of Nick Zeppos and his team. Susan Venti was the interim chancellor when I came in. Tremendous work and put us in the right position. And then I think there was Nashville. I think Nashville is a tremendous place right now. Of course, for those of you that haven't been here for a while, you look at it as, what's that place, right? I don't recognize it, but it's thriving. It's a wonderful community, and it is a community that is very much our home, where we can thrive, where we can do more together. So all these things just felt right. And this was important to me when I talked to the board, is that there was an appetite and an aspiration. This is not a place that is happy with where it is or worried about decline, as some of our peers are. This is a place that wants to be better, and that was exciting. That was exhilarating, and so I thought, fantastic, let's go.
I love what you said a few minutes ago about the role of the university in our culture right now.
Yes.
And you talked about it in your commencement address, which is something I grapple with and we grapple with in the news media every day, which is this idea. We had the public health crisis on the one hand, and then a sort of parallel crisis of confidence in the country in some ways, in politics and in our culture, and this idea of division.
Yes.
And so what role can any university, but particularly ours, play in starting to stitch that back together as a place where people can have honest and open conversations without having their heads bitten off or believing this or that, and to maybe even learn and maybe change your point of view a little bit? Because so many people now come in with their minds made up about everything and won't move off that position. So what role does the school have in stitching us back together?
This is a humongously important role for universities today, and I think we are very well positioned to take a leadership role on these issues, but it's urgently necessary. If you go back to our history, and you may know this, but it's important to be mindful of that. The original founding intent when Cornelius Vanderbilt endowed the university was to create the great university of the South to heal the wounds of a divided nation after the Civil War. So the sense that universities can be places where polarization can be overcome and where we can deal with the difficult issues of our day in a way that looks for better understanding and less polarization has been with us from the beginning. Now we need to assume that responsibility and reinterpret in the context that we're dealing with. As we all know, we're living in an age of polarization. We're living also in an age where we, just like you said, we stop listening to each other. And this we see among our student body too. It's not broad, but we do have issues from time to time. And one of my faculty members had a beautiful term for that. She called it a rush to righteousness. Okay, rush to righteousness. I think it's a wonderful way to capture the essence is that we're not coming in with an appreciation is that things are complicated and we need to have different points of view. The attitude now is like, we know what's the right thing to do, it's the morally right things to do, and if you're not with me, you're against me, and obviously that can only be because you are lacking moral sense, and then I can call you names. And that is bad, that's toxic, and we need to actively work on that. So our commitment to free expression and open discourse, we call it open forum, crucial pillar. Our commitment to principled neutrality, so that we're not settling debate but encouraging them, crucial pillar. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we foster a culture of civic discourse. And that requires the active work of the students. We can't legislate that. That's a culture. So we're working on that with our student leaders. They're very responsive that they know that that's not working when we have these kind of battlegrounds. But then we also need to develop tools of how do we deal with these challenging situations, especially in an age of social media where it's so easy to attack each other, not only in the classroom, but outside of it. So I think we have alignment on that. Faculty is aligned, students are aligned. Now we need to do the hard work to make this part of our everyday experience here at Vanderbilt, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in the residential colleges. All these things need to fit together in order to create a culture where we really can explore the important issues of a day with a culture, with a commitment to civil discourse.
And you found students are receptive to that?
I did, and so we had initial conversations already with the VU Acceptors, which are some of our students' leaders, and I met last week with the new leaders of our student government. They're they understand that. They don't want to live in an environment which is polarized and where there are these battlegrounds and which basically becomes kind of an arm wrestling match, who can shout the loudest. So they're committed to that. The faculty is committed to that. We talked about it in the faculty repeatedly. The faculty senate passed a resolution a year and a half ago reaffirming those principles. So we're aligned on that, but we now need to make it practical. We need to operationalize it in everything that we do, from our orientation to how we have discussions in the residential colleges, to how we deal with it in the classroom, and also to help our students to navigate that environment, particularly the social media environment.
How different, having been in higher education for some time now, how different is this moment in terms of students challenging institutions, students challenging the history of the college, students challenging their professors in a way that maybe they didn't a generation ago. Do you see that as different
Yes.
now than it's been?
This is a very activist student body, a student generation across the country, maybe a little bit less at Vanderbilt than in other places. And it comes from a great point. It's because they want to make the world a better place, and they come with a strong sense of urgency. Where things go wrong is when that urgency and that desire to have an impact becomes polarized, so we're not listening to each other anymore. And so one issue, to just give you an example of that, is this is true across the country among student bodies, among students, is on, for example, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And they're very passionate on that, or some of our students, some of students at our university are passionate on that, but they're conceptualizing this issue in different ways. So one of them, looks at Israel as an oppressive state, kind of as an apartheid state, and then when things get bad, they're calling people that are supportive of Israel racist, and then the supporters of Israel calling the other part of the student anti-Semitic. So we have one part of the student calling the other racist, one calling the other anti-Semitic, both of them totally committed to social justice, both of them on the political left but at each other's throat. So those are the types of things where we have to create a culture where we can talk about something as complicated and as emotionally involving as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with a commitment to listening first. Listening first, understanding first, doesn't mean you have to change your point of view, but the commitment that we have to each other is that we are members of one community with a shared sense of purpose and grounded by the same values. And that can get lost when the emotions get a little bit too high. So our job is, working with the students and the faculty, is to create that culture where people can understand each other and discuss things in a civil manner.
It's so important. I mean, we have a political culture where you can't concede anything. You
Can't
can't give
concede
an inch
anything.
or you've lost the argument. So
That's right.
anything you can do at this level to bring us back from the brink is important. I'm curious about your point of view, having grown up in Berlin.
Yes.
Your family having seen an airlift and the Berlin Wall
Yes.
and the fall of that wall. What your view of America was, and what you see in America now that you've lived here so long and now that you're helping to create a generation of young Americans. Do you see America as exceptional from your point of view in German and now here?
So I grew up in Berlin, as you say. I was lucky enough to be born on the west side in West Berlin. My experience of crossing a border as a kid is like your parents put you in the car at 6 a.m., it's dark, and you get to the border and there's bright lights and barking, German shepherds and people with machine guns, and people will take apart your car to make sure that there are no hidden parts of it, or where you can store refugees from East Germany. So that's the experience of of living there. Or you go out for dinner at night and your broad's right next to you. It's 9 feet high. It's brightly lit, and you're literally walking outside the restaurant, and as far as the wall over there, there's an East German border guard looking down on you with a machine gun. So that's the experience, and my family, or everyone who grew up in Berlin, has this tremendous gratitude to the United States for keeping Berlin free and for defending the freedom of Berlin during the airlift, the various crises, at Checkpoint Charlie. For those of us that are old enough to remember those images, that is deeply ingrained when you grow up in that city. And then you have the other experience. So I was fortunate enough to be in Berlin when the wall came down. So I was there when the Brandenburg Gate opened. I was on top of the wall. Hard to do. 9 feet high, hard to do. And there were these spikes coming out with people that plugged away at it and got these little pieces. So my jacket actually ripped trying to climb up the wall. And so for many years I had a stitched jacket, and then people say, hey, what happened? I said, well, I was climbing up the wall, Brandenburg Gate. Was very good. And anyway, but I learned that the same nasty border guards that were really unpleasant to you yesterday, the moment the wall came down, they were super nice. Hey, you want to take a picture? You want to buy my hat? So they were immediately like there was this sense of fraternization, taking pictures, sharing, telling stories. Amazing, overnight. And what that taught me at that time, and really has been with me, is that, once you put people in an environment where they can thrive, where you have the right political institutions, where there's freedom, where there's democracy, where there's a possibility for people to develop, to grow, all these differences can evade very quickly. And it also showed me how absolutely crucial it is to have functioning institutions, to have these institutions that make America so special, alive and strong and supported. And of course, we're all worried about that at this point, about what's happening to the erosion of these norms in our country. And I'm committed that at Vanderbilt and as a university, we're becoming a force to reinforce that. And a small piece of that is our project on unity and American democracy that John Meacham is running. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to remind people what is great about this, what is the great about this kind of, what are the foundations, how do we strengthen them, and how we were able in the past, despite a different point of view, to come together and find solutions to important challenges. We need to keep this in mind. This is so important. It's what makes America great, but it needs to be fostered. You can't just rely on it on running on its own. It requires the active engagement of its citizens.
I know we have some questions in the crowd. You can start thinking about those. But I'm going to anticipate some questions from parents out there about the state of higher education, the cost of an education, how hard it is to get in, not just here, but at schools across the country. It feels completely different and more competitive than it was a generation ago. There's a madness at the high school level, people trying to get their resumes just right to get in and try to pick the right school. What's your view of all that, of where education is, how expensive it is, and how competitive it's gotten just to get in anywhere, let alone here?
It's a great question. It's a challenging question. And what one has to remember is that what makes the American university system or system of higher education great and also unique is its diversity. Is that we have so many different ways in which students can get a higher education, from community colleges to the very highly selective private universities. And so it's very important for us to understand that you need to find the right spot for your students so that they can thrive in that environment. I think sometimes that's a little overshadowed by obsession with rankings. And whenever, I meet a lot of parents that want to say, hey, is Vanderbilt the right place for me or for my son or my daughter? And what I always tell them, make sure that this is a good fit. And even if, you're like one spot down or one step down, don't worry about it. You want to be in an environment where your son and daughter, where your young student can thrive. And the differences are dramatic. And that's even true in our segment, which is like, let's call it top 30 private research universities. The culture at University of Chicago and Vanderbilt is very different, okay? And they're both great institutions, and they have their own, they're very clear about who they are, but it's extremely different. And they always say, like, they're both ice cream, but one's chocolate and one's vanilla. And they're totally on the other different spectrum. And if you go to one place for whatever reason, because one's more prestigious than the other, you're making a crucial mistake. And the same is true about, do you want to go to a private place, a liberal arts college, or do you want to go to a public university? Finding the fit is crucial. So I think there's too much overemphasis on rankings and things like that. Having said that, we're not shy about that we want to be the place, the destination for the best faculty and for the best students that can benefit from what we can offer. It's a rare privilege to be in that position, and so we embrace that. But we also want to think about how do we make contributions for higher education more general. That's an important part, and part of that is to do with partnerships, to our work in Nashville. We have a big partnership, for example, with Metro Public Schools on that. This is an important responsibility we have. And then you were asking about affordability. There's a big issue, again, across universities. It's important to understand, however, again, that there are tremendous differences. So when you look at Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt has by any measure, one of the very best financial aid programs in the country. Princeton Review, I think, ranked us number 4, something like that. But we are, whether it's 4 or 3 or 5 or 2, it is among the very best. And what it means is that if you come to Vanderbilt now as an undergraduate, it's no loan and need blind. That means all our students can come to Vanderbilt irrespective of the financial background of their families. And that is enabled by the generosity of our alums that are supporting the next generation of students. Could not be done without the philanthropic support and the generosity of our alums. We spend around $200 million in financial aid every year, just to give you a sense of that, and it enables for us to make sure everyone can do that. Now, when people look at cost of growing up, so we look at it, and when we look at the kind of after financial aid, we look at the average, we basically have been flat over the last 15 years. So again, we were able to keep that at that level because of the philanthropic support of our alums. Couldn't be done any other way. Because it's important to understand, this is an expensive education. We're investing an enormous amount of resources into our students. Our students, when they're 18 or 19, they can work, if they so choose, they can work in a research lab, a nanofabrication lab, or a biomedical lab at the very top of the field at 20. I mean, we have research facilities, research instrumentations in like biochemistry or cell biology. One of these things costs $60 million. And we have undergraduates being able to develop their own curiosity to already get engaged in research. And then that's an enormous, enormous investment in our students. Research labs, residential colleges, services for the student, career services. So we want to be able to be a destination for those students for whom they can benefit from that, and then we want to put them in an environment where they can take full advantage of that, and that takes resources.
I think we've got time for a couple of questions from the crowd. If you want to just raise your hand, we can get you a, yes, sir, you're closest. I think we have a mic. We have a mic for you, so everybody can hear it. No, not in the back. They can't.
Okay, now can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, I have 2 questions. You get to pick your one because I like multiple choice when I was going to school here.
Okay.
What you have going here is wonderful. How do we export that faster than 1,700 students at a time? That's
Yes.
number one. Number 2, there are, quote, facts out there that if you think about just a little bit, they can't be true. Can you teach critical thinking?
So, yes. I'm doing multiple choice now, okay? So yes, yes, you can teach critical thinking, but you have to practice it. So you can't, it's not just about people tell you how to do it, you have to practice this. And when I talked about our commitment that they can engage in civil discourse and engage with the difficult issue of the day, that needs to be practiced on a day-to-day level. That's a hugely important role for us to do so that our students, when they go out into the world, are critical thinkers and can engage with these issues. The second question, your first question is a really important one. There is something magical about this size of a student body. And it creates a sense of community and residential experience that's special. And if you have 20,000 students, it's different. So we love that, but the question that you're asking is a very important one. How do you scale that beyond the undergraduate or the people that are here in residence? We've done some of that already very successfully. Peabody has been at the nursing school, have been leaders on that through technology, but it's certainly something that is a top priority for us as we're thinking about the future. How do you do this at scale? Now, just one comment on that. What was so interesting about COVID, or one of the lessons that was surprising, at least to me, is that we had the great online experiment. Right? And, we had for a while, if you go back into the spring of 2020, everything was shut down, everybody had taught online. And what we learned were 2 things. The students loved being together in person, and the faculty was quite comfortable teaching online. Okay, so, all right, now savor that for a moment, okay? So I I have my 19-year-olds that grew up with TikTok and, and cell phones and the digital generation. They want to be in person. And my 60-year-old history teacher says online, hey, I got that covered. Okay, so it reinforced for us, one, the value of a residential education. And it opened up the opportunity now through technology to have a broader reach, because our faculty now experience that they can do it and they're comfortable with it. So how do we do that? And how do we, for example, rethink lifelong learning for the alumni community along those lines? That's what we're working on right now.
You took them both. Impressive. You had a choice and you took both. Let's try to reach back. Can we go all the way in the back? We want to reward the back.
Yeah, let's have Lauren
it's a
run
lot
a
of
little
my
bit there.
hungover
Yeah, give her a little
friends back
exercise
there,
there. Yeah,
but
good.
still. Let's let them ask anyway. There we go.
Chancellor, I wanted to hello.
All good.
Congratulate Vanderbilt on their recent selection by Forbes magazine as having the #1 online computer science course in the country. And that was my background as well. What do you see as the role in Vanderbilt in projecting or maintaining an online curriculum?
Great question. It's a little bit of a follow-up from what I just hinted in my last answer. Online is clearly a way for us to reach larger audiences. Now, it's important to be clear about what it is and what it doesn't do. It is not a replacement for the deep engagement that you get from living on campus and have a transformative education. It's not going to disrupt that. Where it is great for is for students, some of them are working, to engage in lifelong learning without the hassle now to rip up their whole life and come back on campus for 2 years. So an important part for us that we have to think about is how do we have the great content that we have, the great lessons that we have, and expand access to them. Our great professors, for people for whom coming on campus now for a year or 2 years or 4 years is just not in the cards. That, to me, is the real place for online. So not as a replacement or what they call in tech a disruptor, right, of the college model, but as an expansion of that. And for that, it was crucial to have the experience across the university that we can do this. So we've had pioneers on campus. Computer science is a great example, and we're very pleased with that recognition. I mentioned nursing, I mentioned the education school. The law school is getting into that now as well. So they're developing a master of legal studies. So that's a great direction for us to go, but it's not a replacement for what we already do very well. It is something where we can expand our reach.
And encouraging to hear the students wanted to be there in the classroom.
Absolutely.
They didn't fall back into that routine.
No. They wanted to be together, desperately to be together. I mean, there was such a hunger for this, and you can probably feel it right now on campus a little bit. When I was there on move-in day, we have always this amazing experience on move-in day when when the families drive up, with their students, and move-in day is always full of emotions, right? There is oh my God, this is going to be so exciting. Ooh, do I really fit in? Will I may have friends? Oh, my baby, she's going to do it all on her own, and she can do it. So the big questions, and then the small ones, right? Will the bed sheets fit? Did you bring the mallet? So a lot of emotions going on, and what we do so well, I think, and it's in line with our our sense of community, is that the students come in, and the parents come in, and then we have this NASCAR pit, when we have about hundreds of, many of them sophomores and juniors that come and now bring the new students back in, right? And they help me, hey, what's your name? And everybody feels part of the community right away, and you can see everyone relaxing, including the parents. But that experience, right, then our freshmen come in, many of them haven't had that in high school. So they were a generation, right, where their last 2 or 3 years of high school were really dramatically disrupted. So the energy that they're feeling now, you can almost touch it, And one last comment on this move-in day. So last year was my first time I've seen the move-in day. And it's really an amazing experience because we have all these hundreds of volunteers. They're wearing T-shirts. They don't get paid. They get a T-shirt and a cup of coffee. So they're here since 6 in the morning, heavily caffeinated, super excited, jumping around, screaming, and then, the NASCAR pit happens. But last year's students, this is typically sophomores that do that, last year's students were there for the next generation, but they didn't experience themselves. And that is such a wonderful expression of what we are as a community, is that, it just hit me as I was walking around there. They're here for their classmates. They're here for the next generation, even though they didn't experience it themselves.
I think do we have time for another one? Sure.
So, Chancellor Diermeier,
Oh boy, no, I have to pay it. Let me take a sip first. My board member is speaking. Okay, good.
So, obviously, very inspiring and exciting times, and I feel like this reunion is a pivotal moment for sort of electrifying everything that you've said. So, what advice would you give to the alumni today on how we can get behind the cause?
Wonderful question, and Stephen Madden is like a model alum, so he is so committed to Vanderbilt. It's wonderful. I think here's what we would love. Think about what you would love to do, what you're engaged with, right? We'd love you to be ambassadors. We'd love you to be mentors. We'd love you to think about career opportunities. If you want to financially contribute to Vanderbilt, fantastic. But whatever you want to do, ask yourself, how can you give back to this community? And for example, it is an enormously valuable thing for us if we have opportunities for internships for our students, or career advice, or just telling them, this is a career you may not have thought about. We're restructuring in our career operations. We're very committed to that. This was one of the things that had to get better, but have been making great progress on that. But to provide career opportunities for our students requires the engagement of our alums. So if after you spend this time together, you walk away and you're inspired to be part of this, send us a note, have a conversation with us. We'd love you to be engaged, whatever it is that you're passionate about.
And if you slip a check in the note, that's fine too. Come on, make the ask. No. We're going to let people go about their days. I have one final question. Was it as gratifying for you as it was for the rest of us to watch towers reduced to a pile of brick and dust? Because I lived in a single in Towers, and there are prisoners at Rikers Island who had better living conditions than I did. Good riddance.
Well,
am I right?
It was.
By the way, you're doing beautiful work
That's
now.
good. Looks good now.
Yeah.
It was our tribute to Stalinist architecture, and so, we had an elaborate process, and at any rate, so I was there. So one thing is, Carmichael Towers actually was super helpful for us because we wanted to already blow them up, all of them, in 2020. And then we decided, no, let's keep them another year. And that allowed us now to have additional space for our students so that we could have single occupancy for everybody. So they had at the very end of their lifespan, they made an important contribution to Vanderbilt, right? So
One last gasp.
one last gasp. And well, it was exciting to push the button. All right, with that.
Thank you, Chancellor,
so
for all
much.
you've
Thank
done
you.
for our
Thank you.
university.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.